I think Mel has done an excellent job of sort of explaining more or less what the scope is. I'm going to add a little bit more color, but in the interest of time, instead of using a brush, I'm going to use a paint gun. So these are the three topics that we want to cover in the first phase. Is really just talk about what those discover what those existing and new technologies, really the developing ones in the area of material movement is, and then two important parts that we will develop as part of the first phase, collaborative with all the members, is really getting alignment on how do we really properly evaluate these technologies in the context of mining and looking at that from a holistic perspective, and then developing a roadmap and really thinking about it in advance so we can do this faster, better, and cheaper with low risk than we always do that to accelerate to those potentials. Now, the way we do this in terms of evaluating or identifying the technologies is taking three lenses to it. And so if you look at any hauling system, simplistically said, it's got three elements to it. It's got your energy technology or information technology part, and then the physical components to it. And so these things don't operate or don't develop at the same rate. So it's interesting to look at the intersection between these industries and the developments. And if you look at what is happening in hauling in terms of the mechanical and the information side, we see sort of an evolution where there's a much faster rate of development on the information side. We see the same things happening in energy, where we're moving from external to internal to batteries and electric systems, where there's significant different rates of development. And then, of course, you look at how energy is managed on systems as well. All of these things have to be taken into account. So when we look at what's coming down the line, we're looking, for instance, at what is the rate at which battery technology is evolving. And if you see what Artisan has, did when they started, we could predict, 5 years down the line that they'd have a 40-ton underground truck because we could see how the battery technology is evolving. And so in that way, it's not just what is happening in the market today, but in what areas do we see accelerated improvement, and how do you actually incorporate that into the concept of hauling. And then in evaluating that, we want to break it down into these elements. The nice thing about hauling is there's physical dimensions involved in this. You can only do so many different things. The options are finite, but within that, there's very interesting combinations that are possible. And so when we look at this, we would look at all those different elements in describing these technologies, and then also working with all the members to understand where is their interest and where is the biggest opportunities for them to reduce cost, increase safety, increase mining, and things like that. And then on the basis of describing those technologies across these dimensions, we will then go and understand, at what phase of development these technologies are. This is very much sort of intrinsic to the technology itself, not necessarily at this stage how it applies to the mining. The second component of the work then is to develop this evaluation framework. It's interesting when you talk and think about your own environment, it's sometimes quite hard to actually understand truly what is the full whole economic cost of your hauling system. Because hauling is a system, it's not just one technology. It's the indirect parts, it's the direct parts, it's all around the maintenance, the support of the system, the roads, the infrastructure, the energy that you use, and its impact on economic, society, and the environment. And we want to make sure that we have a system that allows us to compare in an objective way across different technologies. The way that different technologies break down in terms of its OPEX cost, with its CAPEX cost, with its indirect cost, all of those things may be too different without a holistic system to evaluate that objectively. So we'll work with the members to understand that. And when working with the members, we help understand as well the constraints they have in their systems in terms of spatial capacity, flexibility, and energy efficiency, and some of these other trade-offs to really understand how it applies to all the members as we do this study. So we have a holistic evaluation framework. And then once that's done, how do you now choose how to go forward? And I've been involved in some of these studies for quite a bit. And really the focus has to shift to understand how did the technology fit into the context of your mining plan. The evaluation should not in the end be, what's the cost of the technology, or even if you have a holistic cost of technologies, but what needs to change in the mine in order to incorporate that? What is the operability issues? How does it relate to safety? How does it relate to supporting your mine plan? And so the idea would be there, instead of looking at the technology in isolation, maybe develop a different alternative to evaluate this in order to understand then how to go test that. And again, working with the members to develop that approach. And so the idea would here be just as a simple example is to maybe take a whole mine where we have historic information about the mine and model that with the new technologies embedded in it, and then start to explore virtually with software what are all the issues and where does the value lie. Once you determine the value in the context of the holistic mine plan, it's far easier to then go back to the technology and say, what are you uncomfortable about the technology and what's the value of resolving those issues? What do we need to go and test in the context of how we make it work in a holistic mine plan? And so this is just an example of the simulation and modeling technologies that's now available. It allows you to actually look at the technology and simulate it all the way from the components in terms of mean time to failure, all the way to how it fits and integrates into the system, and then do that across the whole mine plan as well using different technologies. Now, I'd say 5 years ago, it'll probably be much harder to do this, or if not impossible, than what it is today. So the idea is, as part of this project, we'll work with the members to develop, an acceptable route to do a lot of this virtually, so we can accelerate the understanding and come to a conclusion in terms of how we need to go forward, what we need to test, and then see how we can accelerate the value creation. And that's sort of the bit of color that we would add to what Mal already added in terms of how we will do the project.
Perfect. So, any questions for Adriaan and Mal?
The study, the way it was laid out, was talking about Rokon and stuff like this. It's already been done, already implemented, but it's not limited to that, right? You're looking at things like Hyperloop and maglev and even military car technology aircraft. There are things outside as well that have not been looked at, I think, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And many of the progress in some of those technologies to use them has been part of the components. Linear accelerating motors haven't been developed or cheap enough, or the control systems haven't been good enough. So that's why we want to break it in those components, so we understand the rate of improvement of some of those components that relate to how some of these innovative systems will be enabled. And then put them in the evaluation framework and then put them in the context of the mine to understand. But yeah, absolutely. The good thing we have is that there's really finite set of parameters and components that you can evaluate. There's only so many ways that you can actually physically move something, so that is nice.
Question from Al.
Great. Yeah, I want to commend everyone for the work. I think it's quite interesting for mining. Just is the focus on technologies that can work from mine to mill or mine to port?
I think the focus right now is mine to mill, but extending beyond that to the very long distance as well. And so Hyperloop, for instance, you could think about that as a micro environment in the mine, but then extending beyond that as well. Yeah, so it would relate to the longer movement as well. Inter and intra mine.
Since this is collaborative research, and obviously the companies are investing, are you measuring what Mal mentioned about risk sharing, and this is investment sharing in a way, R&D, for each dollar you are putting in, what each company is getting as a value of the research? Are they able to measure that with collaboration to be able to entice the other members to join in as well?
Well, we would hope that the value that you'd uncover through the research, would be, several multiples the cost of doing this, because the value is not just in uncovering what the technologies are, but really getting a good view of what the value is, and I don't think it's been done properly, and then accelerating the adoption of those technologies that will be realized in the mines.
About the return on investment, I'm only talking about the investment in research.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. I think the results and the benefit that it will lead to the companies to unlock would be seen as the return that you get on the investment in this research.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll just expand upon that, because that's a question that we've been trying to answer many over the past few years. So in collaboration, right, we're looking to leverage resources, and I talk about resources, and it's easy to say, well, that's money and that's people, but the real value is in the experience and the intellect, of the true kind of collaboration. Sharing is great, okay, and coordinating is great, but true collaboration is when we get a bunch of smart, experienced people together, and that's where the magic happens, and you actually accelerate that pace of technology development. So, that's the value of the collaboration, but at the end of the day, the result, I want to be able to kind of relate that back to that collective input that was so when we say that we spent $1 million together on this, my part of it was only $100,000, and the result was a $10 million return. It's easy to talk like that, but you can get caught in the accounting of that, and I think we need to be careful with that. At the end of the day, if we're working together and we are sitting around the table and looking at each other in the eye, and we can say, you know what, we got great value out of this. I'm not so fussed about the individual company value, just that we're all getting value in the collaboration and the relationship we have with the other miners.
All right. Thank you very much, folks.